say it. There we go. Sorry. Thanks.
Hey,
Thanks, y'all.
takes up the screen. Well, thank you, Beth. Did you have anything else to add, or?
All right now.
We'll let you call on the next person.
Okay, Kathy? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I mute myself so that my dog doesn't and my husband don't interrupt meetings.
Dog and your husband.
My dog and my husband in that order, not necessarily, I guess, but let's see, I've been on trustees, I think 4 years. This is my second year as chair. We have at St. John's been, we used the pandemic and the closure to do some renovations and upgrades to our sanctuary. So we took the opportunity to replace the carpet, and we took the opportunity to reconfigure some of the pews so that we can make the sanctuary more accessible for folks in wheelchairs. So we created more space for wheelchairs. We have also, throughout the pandemic, been doing video and now we're doing hybrid. So we have video and hybrid. We've taken the opportunity to upgrade our video and sound equipment. For that, we got a grant from our endowment so that we could get a new screen and a new camera. And we have we've been really, we had a really good year last year. We are operating in the black. We had a budget surplus for trustees for the last fiscal year. So we're really lucky and blessed and just rocking along on Allendale.
Awesome. I was just thinking, no one yet has said we're out of money and we're desperate, which is an interesting experience, actually. Jeffrey, I think, are you last here?
Sounds like it. I'm Jeffrey Kay. I'm the chair of the board of trustees of University Methodist, and served as a trustee for 4 years and have been chair for 4 years. I guess we used the time, at least initial time during COVID, to kind of reposition our education building. We had been housing a early childhood center there for many years, and that closed down. It was sort of, it had some issues leading into COVID, and COVID took the kind of final shot, and so we looked at kind of repositioning the building and doing some cleanup work to the facilities. Over the last handful of years, I guess our primary focus has been transitioning away from a parsonage, which had been in the church for probably 80 plus years, to a pastoral allowance, and that took up a fair amount of political capital and energy over probably a 2-year period. And we're constantly battling to manage kind of older buildings. Fortunately, no major renovations on the horizon anytime soon, we hope. So our primary goal this year, our focus is really going to be on taking a comprehensive look at church security, and both from the standpoint of security in context of our work and worship experience, as well as security for our buildings during the week. So I would certainly love to be able to leverage any work that you guys may have done or your boards of trustees may have done, over the past 4 or 5 years on that. We're not looking to recreate the wheel.
There you go. Well, thank you, Jeffrey. We do, I'll have to get it from Frank, but I do have a person that can do camera systems pretty cheap. and does a great job in terms of the. I visited with your pastor and some others around some of the safety issues. And, challenges and threats are real, and they're getting more real. And phone threats, you would not be the only church if you had received some. And so that's something we're going to be spending a little bit more time on. I don't have I didn't come prepared to talk to that in detail tonight, but we can talk about a few resources that maybe can be helpful in some places to start. My name is Kendall, and the title, but Director of Financial Administrative Ministries. And so I work with the conference trustees. I've had the opportunity to meet many of you. I don't know if you remember, Beth, but I preached at Manchac, and I'm pretty sure I met you kind of showing me around in the morning. And I know I've been at Berkeley as well, Bill. And I thought we met there. And so some of you I've met at times. And so I'm always grateful to see you. Kathy, I love St. John's. I had the chance to be there for I think it was a Sunday school class. And it was like grill the guest day. They could ask me anything. And but I love the facility and your use of art in kind of letting people know who you are. I think that's a really cool thing. I have when I visit with trustees, there's a kind of a presentation I do, and I'm going to try to avoid that. But I may click and share a screen every once in a while because that's my best way of remembering and making sure I don't lose anything. But I want to start with asking you to think about your role. Even tonight, even in introductions, you begin to get a picture of just how important trustees are in the operation and life of the church, don't you? I mean, if you all, you can make or break a church, either through inattention to something, attention to the right things, or some of those other pieces. And I'd like to encourage you to think you're also the chief evangelist of the church. We never get a second chance to make a first impression. And what people see, how they experience your church in every possible way, the way it looks, the way it smells, the way the bathrooms, all of that signage, all of that begins to make a first impression. And so one of the things our discipline actually says that we're to, kind of go through the building and do like a complete inspection once a year. Do you all do that in a formal way? I would, just recommend that it be helpful. Just get like a legal pad for everybody. To be honest, I come from a church. The last church I served had the simplified structure, single board model. So, but we met in the narthex and we prayed there together and just turned everybody loose and said, I want you to see the church with new eyes. If you had never been here before, what would you see? And I had somebody ask me where the restroom nearest the sanctuary was in that building, and I was still new. And I found one, and it scared me. But the reason it was difficult to find is because all of the paraments and other things had been stacked in front of it. And so I actually asked my trustee chair to go with me. I said, let's see what this bathroom is like. And it took us about 10 minutes to move stuff. And then he stuck his head in. And I wish I could make the look that he made. But he said, I'm glad you didn't know where to send anybody because I wouldn't have wanted anyone to see that. And so as it turns out, that building had 16 bathrooms. And we found 2 that were really acceptable by the end of the night. We didn't have the budget to go do all of them, and you wouldn't probably either. But we ranked them and said, these need the most attention soonest. And let's do 2 to 4 bathrooms a year until we make sure that our restrooms are nice. And so that's just a quick example. My wife and I were in Georgia. We decided we wanted to attend a United Methodist Church. It happens to be located at the intersection of 2 4-lane highways, which I thought was neat. We actually went past it on the way to get something to eat. And we looked at the sign. The sign faced both 4 lanes, which was beautiful. And it had the name of the church and the name of the pastor, but not a sketch of idea when that church met or what kind of services were available. And so we got online because we're really committed folks. If I were a visitor, I'd have given up right there. But as a really committed United Methodist, got online and found that there were 3 services and they were in 3 separate buildings on a 5-building campus. We got there for the 9:30 service and there was no sign naming any of the buildings or telling us where to go. And so we literally sat for about 10 minutes until we watched people leave one building and go in the other. And we said, well, the building they're going in must be the one where the next service is. We're going to go. And that's how we got there. And for what it's worth, and we celebrate this, that Sunday, they had a big celebration because the trustees had just finished the parking lot and restriped it. And the parking lot was beautiful. It really was. But you had no idea how to get to worship. And so it's things like that. The other thing that I've noticed, we all are guilty. If you walk past it enough, you don't see it anymore. And so you set it down and then you walk past, oh, somebody ought to do something about that. And then, and pretty soon you forget that it's there. So on our last trustee journey, there's a rocking chair inside a side entrance. It isn't used a lot, but it's used by parents, because you can hear the service and everything from that rocking chair. And it had a cloth cover on it that was ripped and torn and ugly. And one of the trustees, as we walked through the building making notes, just ripped it off the chair and brought it to the meeting and put it on the table and said, I will personally commit to replacing this before next Sunday. It was like $10, but we walked by it so often we didn't see it. And here we're telling our young mothers, here's what you get. An old wooden rocker with a torn cover. And so we've told that young family who it is we are as a church and where they sit in our values. Does that make sense? And the other thing to notice is, how does your church smell? Again, you can get used to a lot of stuff, but a lot of our churches, when you come in, they smell kind of musty. Or if we haven't done a really thorough cleaning, maybe you smell feet. And, that's a really key trigger for people. And so one of the things I suggest, look around, do you have a plan to keep your church freshly painted? Again, if you painted the whole church, you couldn't afford it. But what if you had a 5 or 6 year plan where you did 1/5 of the classrooms every year and they got fresh paint and the hallways got fresh paint? And then you did another the next year and another the next year. And the sanctuary, maybe you look at every 10 years, something like that. But then when you walk in, what you smell is fresh paint. And it feels like a church going somewhere rather than a church dying. And I know that's a simple thing, but it really does make a difference. One of my favorite comics is of the sign out in front of the church that does have the times of the worship service on it, but the hedge is grown over it so you can't see the sign. And the other thing I recommend, do this walk through once in the daylight, do another at night. Is your parking lot safe? We mentioned threats. Do people feel safe coming and going from your building? Is it well lit? And even again, can you see a sign at night? My wife and I were appointed to a church in Kansas City, and we wanted to see how many worship services had. The bishop gave us overnight to pray. So we drove up, we're trying to check around. No lights. We had our flashlights out looking at the sign, trying to figure out when worship was. Again, it's on a 4-lane street, but not very effective signage. You get the chance to do that. Your probably primary job is not IT, but in this day and age, our sign is our website. In this day and age, the first impression we often make is the quality of our video. And we do get a chance to have input. What level of sound equipment do you have? What level of video equipment do you have? Is it a priority? Is it one of those things we do with excellence and we know we're going to do with excellence? And so that's, kind of a key piece in there. Last thing to do as you go through that. So we have a list, and we have a list of all the things that need done. And some of the things we've seen are probably going to be capital improvements. I'm guessing there's going to be another air conditioner in your future, Beth. And so, and maybe you look around, you go, gosh, we've had this furnace for 25 years. Or even, when was the last time we went up and inspected the roof? Those are high dollar events. But if we're not planning for those in some way through budgeting or through, maybe saving and setting aside money for particular projects, we end up reacting to those. And now, you lose 2 air conditioner units and I've got to have 40,000 and I've got to have it in a week. That's different than knowing I'm going to replace 2 units a year until we get all of them within a 5-year warranty. And we're going to budget for that. And we're going to begin to make those replacements. So we did that at the conference office as we realized that warranties were coming up. Unfortunately, in the first year, 3 died ahead of our plan. But we've tried to do that. So we're changing a few each year and keeping things new. And you might begin to hear a theme here, but there are a lot of things we do in our buildings and in our structures that we can't afford to do all at once. But we can do it a bite at a time if we plan for it and we're intentional about it. Does that kind of make sense? And I don't know how you're doing that in your own church, but if you have something is going to have to be replaced, say every 20 years, and it's $100,000 unit, set aside $5,000 a year and in a furnace fund or in an air conditioner fund or whatever, so that it doesn't all come due at once and really mess up the rest of the priorities that the church has. And so those are a few considerations on that. The other thing I usually cover is building use. How many of you have a building use policy? Kind of, just give me a little sketch. What does yours look like? Do you charge? Do you not? Do we,
I'd have to go back at, I'll plead 45 days of innocence here. My recollection is that we charge some fees for external groups. We do not charge for some nonprofits and for certainly church-related activities and events. But because of our location next to the state capitol, our newest building, which is now 20 years old, has a big open space on the second floor that can, and as well as classrooms and smaller spaces on the first floor, where particularly during legislative years, people can meet and then go visit their legislators, afterwards or whatever. And we do charge fees for those.
Mhm.
But we have a very comprehensive building use plan, safety plan. I mean, I think the conference has
Yes.
spurred a lot of that, as I recall. I mean, there, some significant things that we all did over the last 4 or 5 years for both personnel and member safety as well as building safety.
Thank you, Ed. Yeah, and through Church Mutual, there are several things available where they will actually help you go through and identify areas that need attention too. Other reflections on building use policy?
Ours, we likewise, we have a use guideline and agreement. So like a 5-page document of all the things you can't do if you're going to use the facility.
Yeah.
That they have to agree to with, security. External groups, there's a rate sheet by room types, et cetera, with custodial built into it as a rate and, deposit structure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we use that for external groups and not-for-profits like AA and, some other things like that. We don't charge for them to use it. And then, of course, internal groups, no charge for. We don't do a lot of weddings, but so
No.
we don't have a center aisle. So
Yeah, I've served that church. I remember that conversation. Let me, just ask you to think for a moment, and all of you again. So you have a role as an evangelist for the church. In the way we present, the way we greet people, the way, that's part of our job. The other thing we might think about, the biggest asset your congregation owns is your building. And it's not in use all the time, mostly. So again, Missouri Church, last church I served, 100,000 square foot cathedral building, and we're adjacent to MU campus, which has 30,000 students and 15,000 faculty there. And the question is, how do we put this building? It's our biggest asset. We've invested more in it than anything else. How do we put it in ministry in our community? And so we did a little, we had an overnight shelter for folks who were homeless. We were a cooling center in the summer, a warming center in the winter. We had 17 12-step programs that met. When we built the new building, it actually had an external exit just for 12-step programs so that people could be anonymous. They didn't have to walk through the halls and all that stuff like that. But on Sunday morning, I was averaging around 550 in attendance, but we added it up and we had over 4,000 people in the building during the week. To the extent that the city's New Year's Eve celebration occurred in our church. So we had 4 fairly large rooms, the sanctuary, a fellowship hall, an older fellowship hall, and a chapel. And all of those were taken over on New Year's Eve with things for kids to do, things for students to do, and they did a 10 o'clock, I want to say, celebration on our front step with confetti and things like that. And they did a midnight for adults in the fellowship hall and others with indoor confetti. And you haven't lived until you've tried to serve communion the day after and the fans turn on and confetti just falls down on everything. But it's the city actually paid people to light the exterior of the building and make it music reactive. And so they're playing music and the whole building is dancing and the whole community was there for New Year's Eve. At Halloween, we did something similar. During Christmas, the students decorate all the business windows with what they called living windows. And so our people were out on the street distributing hot chocolate and coffee. But then there's a big evergreen tree in the front yard, and we were had professional photographers take Christmas pictures of families there. And we asked if we could mail it to them, and that gave us the address so that we could invite them to our Christmas Eve service, which the Halloween thing, I don't know how to describe it. We had a whole circus in the parking lot with climbing towers and everything. And the weirdly popular deal was a box that looked like a sandbox that was actually full of corn, harvested corn. And the kids jumped in and played in that. I don't know what to tell you. Someone else was making tintype photos of the old timey, and they had all costumes and kids and parents could dress up. In the sanctuary, we had our organist blasting our pipe organ. And she played creepy music for Halloween, and she played Christmas carols for Christmas. And we left the front doors open, and I guarantee you could hear it on the street, and you'd be surprised how many people came in the sanctuary to hear her play Jingle Bells. And they would do requests. Can you do Rudolph? And a dad, I remember going, oh, that's not appropriate for a church. And our organist just laughed and started doing Rudolph. So what are the ways that you can make your building the center of your community? Where does the homeowners association meet? Would they be interested in your space? We had, what's the group that does speeches? I can't think what I'm.
Toastmasters.
Toastmasters met there. We had professors that did classes. During finals, we opened the whole downstairs. We added to our wireless capacity, and we invited students to prep for finals in our church. And they could have private rooms, or they could be out we had a cafe in the hall. So, are there, who is your target audience? Who is the group that you really want to reach out to, and how might your building be an asset in that conversation? And now I will also say, being next to the college, you had to reserve a May, June, or July wedding date. That were married there from other states, that just, it made such a difference. And then their kids went to school there, and we got to get to work with their kids. And so how can you do that? One last thing, and it's weird because people don't talk about this with millennials and Gen Z, but we had some amazing stained glass windows in that church, and it was made with all the story of the Hebrew scriptures on the left side of the sanctuary, and all the story of the gospel writers and Jesus on the right side, and the Wesleys in the back. And all of the foreign students that attended MU got a chance to tour our church. And we had a steward tell the story of the windows and why they were there. And you'd be surprised how many chose to come to church there because of the chance to hear the story of the stained glass windows. I mean, that, again, counterintuitive, but it really did make a difference. So in your, I mentioned Kathy, the art, I love some of the, you've got some original pieces that are made there and stuff. They're just gorgeous, but they say to the whole world a little bit about your mission, what makes your church unique. When I built a new building, how we decorated is we hired artists. We gave them our mission statement and said, do your interpretation of it and we'll do a free art show. Everything from sculpture outside to paintings on the wall and we had more people than we could imagine do that. And we had the option to buy the pieces that we thought were the best expression of our vision. And so we decorated our new building with artists, many of whom donated the work, and all of which was unique to our church and vision. So just, I'm inviting you to be creative and think a little bit about what might we do. So now for the fun part, since we're all, bean counters and number people, and we have a lot of legal responsibilities too. And so usually when I'm meeting with a group of trustees, I ask, I'm pretty sure everybody in this meeting, your church is incorporated. And the question always, have you checked to make sure that that is current? And you can go to the Secretary of State website, you can do a search on your church and it'll come up and say, but that does need to be renewed. It doesn't just automatically renew. It's like a $10 fee. It isn't going to cost you much, but it's worth checking on. And many churches forget that. Second thing, along the legal piece is how long do we keep documents? And it varies by document, it varies by state. And so if you have not yet gone to the GCFA website, it's gcfa.org. That stands for General Conference Finance and Administration. But gcfa.org, and there's a tab there that'll say legal services. And one of those things under gcfa.org and legal services will be record retention. And that's, we're indirectly paying for an army of lawyers that work for GCFA and keep that current. And that's a really helpful thing. Along with that also is a tax packet that includes, the definition of UBIT, income tax that you might have to pay and what would make you liable and what does not. Does a thrift store count? Does a child care count? What are the things that are the parameters for that? Any of the documents that you issue from I-9s to W-2s, there'll be articles about that. And it's well worth going just to take a look at that and see how that's going. The other thing that I usually remind people about, this is building use and bequest, but occasionally, and I know this never happened in any of your churches, but occasionally people get the understanding that if it was a memorial gift or it was an endowed gift or whatever, that the trustees get to uniquely control that money, and often that ends up being a fight. Now, that's never happened in your church, right? But I know I can name a church that actually, where the trustee chair asked everyone who was dissatisfied with the pastor to give the money directly to trustees so that they could control it and that the pastor and council couldn't have it. So there's a reason why I bring this up, and thank you, Ed, for that look of disgust. But yeah, but it does happen, and so I remind them that the disciplinary paragraph that gives trustees the authority over memorial and endowed funds begins with the words, "At the direction of the charge conference, the trustees shall." And the trustees continue to report to the charge conference. If it's actually a charge conference, the makeup of the charge conference and the makeup of your primary board are really the same. And so I just offer that guidance so that no one gets aside, and so that no one holds discipline and shakes it at you and wants you to do something you shouldn't do. Now we have, how many of you have endowments? Do you have endowed funds? I'm pretty sure you did, Ed. Anybody else? If you're a chair especially, it's worth reviewing the documents that set that up. It's kind of amazing to me. I've seen this happen over time too. And again, there's nothing not above board about it, but over time, if that doesn't get looked at, we suffer what is often called mission drift. And we may move away from the original intention. And again, it's not anybody that's out, for power, anybody trying to get the money. It's just that Uncle Fred asked for this, and it seems like it's kind of in line, and we don't want to say no to Uncle Fred, and we say yes, and then it becomes an annual event or something like that. And then you go back and review what the endowment was actually set up for, and we may have wandered off the reservation.
In our case, there's a separate endowment board that manages the investments and the dispensation and the disbursement of funds.
Yeah.
The trustees have input into it, as does the pastor and the administrative board and that sort of thing. But there is a separately appointed endowment committee that does that. So it's not a function of the trustees itself.
Excellent. It's, still might not hurt to ask when the last time they reviewed it was.
I know, because I served on the endowment board. We reviewed it when I was there because I was asking a lot of questions.
Yeah, that's usually how it happens. Somebody new comes on, starts asking questions, and somebody, we haven't reviewed that for a while. It's just worthwhile just to kind of keep that focus. And it only takes one violation of the intent of the endowment to really poison the pool for future giving.
Yes.
And so, we want to make sure that everybody knows that we're going to honor the intent of the donor and that we're going to be fastidious about that. And that's what, builds trust, and it also builds support of the funds. And so it's just a reminder to kind of look into that from time to time. So I've got, without checking my notes, I'm going to kind of stop there and just say, what are you working on, or what would you like to talk about tonight?
Did any of you have experience with seeking historic designation for buildings? Coming up on our 100th anniversary, we've been talking about it for quite a while, but the depth of investments that we're going to need to make in the facilities over the next couple of years has led us to look at pursuing a historic designation, because it could possibly open up opportunities for grants of restoration of significant churches or significant buildings and that sort of thing. So I didn't know whether the conference has any information on historic preservation, or if any of the other churches in town do. A university would be my guess that might have another one, just because university is an older building facility too. I don't remember when it was built. We were actually members of University Church when we first got married 100 years ago. So I'm familiar somewhat. I have memories of the sanctuary, but I don't know how old the buildings are, or whether you have preservation status.
I don't know the answer to that question, but I'll certainly ask.
I've not worked on it on the nonprofit side, but was in a partnership group. We owned some buildings in downtown Austin that were designated historic. We didn't go through the process of getting them declared historic. We bought them after the fact. It's a two-edged sword. One, it's great you got a historic building. Downside is you got to get approval for everything you do.
Yeah.
after that point. And anything that you do that materially changes, it makes it very difficult to, we need to add a bathroom, or we need to.
My understanding is that most of the restrictions on the kind of designation we're looking for would apply to the exterior, and we're not gonna do anything to the exterior that that would materially change, and we want to keep things from falling down.
I will say it took us about 9 months to change out a set of awnings on the outside.
And we've had similar situations where, they have some pretty significant designations around what you can and cannot use for windows, the way doors, et cetera. And it is really a two-edged sword. You do open up to some funding. In the future, work may cost you quite a bit more because you have to stay within those boundaries, and it does slow down the process. So it probably is case by case where you have to weigh the pluses and minuses.
Yes.
Is that kind of accurate, John, from your?
Yeah. I mean, we didn't have a choice in
Right.
not taking that into consideration. But 6 months into trying to replace a set of cloth awnings, and there was someone on the preservation board who didn't like any color we chose.
Mm-hmm.
And it just went round and round and round. And we finally had to go to the mayor to go, look, you need to go lean on this person because we really need to replace the awnings.
Well, we're talking about, was this a national historic preservation
Nope. Austin.
designation? Well,
City
see,
of Austin.
we're not going to Austin. We have enough trouble just getting the permission to put a forklift on the sidewalk to put blocks of concrete back up on the roof.
Yeah, and I don't know if becoming a national historic site automatically puts you under the Austin historic site.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question, though. We need to find that out. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I think the other challenge, Ed, is if you would ever decide to do something different, and we certainly don't see that now. And it's a historic building. If downtown changed significantly, or if there were interest in your building that in a novel way of using it that might actually give you more worship space but not be able to preserve the historic nature of the building, we kind of closed the door on some of those more innovative ways of thinking. And there are places where we've had regrets about that. I see yours a little bit differently, just to be honest. So, but I think that's something you have to think about. We're looking at sort of a forever commitment, not a 5-year, 10-year,
Yes.
20-year.
Right.
And that can be challenging. I had a guy. It really challenged my thinking, but I'd ask you to just not get angry, just hear it. But we were working with what they call the life cycle of the local church. And one of the comments he made just in an offhand way is every church that Paul started died. And it's like, it's hard to have a better new church start pastor than Paul. I mean, he started them all over, wrote 2/3 of the New Testament going. And yet after 200 years, all of them are gone. And so
But we're only about halfway through that.
I know you got a long way to go.
Well, actually, our building is. We celebrated our 175th a few years ago. So
There you go.
Yeah.
And I just, it's worth thinking about, are we were locking up an asset and we're confining it to one particular use. If 20 years from now, nobody comes back to sanctuaries because we're a digital church, we're still locked into a historic building. And I think those are unlikely outcomes, but I just think it's worth thinking about because it's not something we can reverse.
Yeah, we're trying to think of the pros and the cons of it, and right now nobody can see that we would be interested in changing anything on the exterior of the building except fix a leaky roof and, you know,
Keep sponge from falling and
yeah, keep the stone ornamentation from falling off and that sort of thing. Our facilities manager would like to get rid of a chimney that used to exhaust coal smoke, but we're not sure we'll even be able to do that. We'll figure it out. But
well, God bless you in that. And like I said, there's not a yes or a no. It's just, you know, here's some things to weigh in making the decision.
sure, no, those are all good things. Thank you.
Any others that are on y'all's mind? I appreciated that. Ed, you really do have a lot on your plate. So, all joking aside.
Yeah. You mentioned, Kendall, doing a tour of the sanctuary or of the facilities. Part of the assessment that we're doing is that we're looking at the end of actually, you know, the last Saturday in March. I think we just about set a date when our architectural firm that's doing the assessment will convene, and we're inviting members of the congregation to come in and walk through all of our buildings and facilities and take a look at the space, how we use it now, and how could we use it. I mean, just because we've always used this room for X classroom, should it be something else?
Exactly.
You know, and that's part of the reimagining and the visioning of what our church can be inside the walls. At the exterior, you know, we're not going to plan to do anything except fix it. Pretty much, but you know, inside, you know, what do we do, and how can we reimagine the space so that it's better utilized and is more inviting?
I love that.
And, you know, sometimes one of the things that some churches have done to great effect is what we call a mystery shopper, which means that they basically pay a stranger to come and worship at their church, and you know, then they fill out a survey when they finish. But you could even do that without paying the mystery shopper, and just have someone who's not from your church go along, maybe from another church, to look at it with fresh eyes, because they'll see the stack of old Sunday school curriculum in the corner that nobody else sees anymore because you're used to it, or they'll smell the funky smell in the narthex or whatever it is. A lot of times fresh eyes can be helpful on that kind of walkthrough.
I've learned tons from that. The other thing I was going to recommend, I shared this website before, but if you haven't been to the Breakthrough Prayer website, there are all kinds of stories, but one thing they've done is have a group just pray in each room. And, you know, two things, you know, asking God to fill the room, but asking for guidance in how best to use it. And some really creative ideas have come from groups of people just praying through the building. And so it's worth something to think about. We did that annually at Good Shepherd when I was there, and also just spent time in the parking lot, basically, but facing east, west, south, and north, praying for the people there and spending time looking at the kind of housing that was out there and being able to sort of re-envision the mission field and then go inside and pray in the building. And we were kind of connecting the two in our prayers about what we were hoping and praying that God would do with our building and our church in that neighborhood.
Kendall, I wanted to check my understanding. It sounded like you were describing the annual inspection as something that could just be the trustees doing their own walkthrough and not a professional inspection. Is that correct?
Sure. Yeah. I'd start there. You know, if big chunks start falling off on people, then it's time for professional. Or if you see something that you don't know what it means. We were looking at a stairwell and there was significant movement, and we had a structural engineer look at it and say, is this something we ought to be worried about? Because it wasn't something that was in our expertise. And there'll be, you may find something like that. When we replaced the carpet, somebody asked us about the undercarpet system that sends your music signal directly to hearing aids. It's called a hearing loop. It's like, well, we've already got the carpet up. This is the cheapest time to do it. And I expected some complaints about changing the carpet and the color of the carpet in the sanctuary. And I got none because people were so happy they could hear better. I mean, the offset was just stellar, and I was very happy. because nobody hung me or anything.
The carpet replacement back in the early 90s. I wasn't on the trustees at that time, but golly, that was, you would have thought, we were, I don't know. That was one of the hardest things that we went through as a congregation.
And we make jokes about that, but we make jokes about it because it's for real.
Everybody has their own idea of what's the right color or the consistency, or should we have it at all, or whatever. It's oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Someone wrote me and asked if it wasn't in the discipline that sanctuary carpet had to be red.
Yeah.
Because they'd never been in a United Methodist church that didn't have red carpet. It's like, no.
Yeah.
Lord, people.
So,
yeah,
it's a fun. I'll close with a quick story. Small church. I was new pastor. They had been talking for 6 months about the carpet in the sanctuary, and this church had the most beautiful stained glass with a deep, deep purple and gold. It was absolutely gorgeous. One group wanted to have this kind of mauve carpet that complemented the windows, and the carpet that was currently in it, get ready, was forest green, which didn't really seem to go with anything, but they'd had for 50 years. And they finally had a vote after all this conversation, and the vote was 5-4 in favor of the mauve carpet. And I'd been there 6 months, and I was seeing my death coming. And the guy whose family had given the original green carpet got up and said, "I move we make it unanimous before we take it to the church." And I made him my lay leader.
Yes.
But it takes one or two people like that often to make that happen.
Yeah.
And
you mentioned a website just a minute ago, Breakthrough
Prayer. If you just do a Google search on that, you'll find Sue Kibbe, who used to be at Ginghamsburg, set that up when she was the church growth person in West Ohio Conference. Okay. And it has pictures, it has stories, it has videos you can play. And there's a book that you can get, but we actually did the process where we asked the church to stop at a particular time of day for 5 minutes a day and pray for a year. And they would and we had a place they could, what they heard, what they experienced, what they thought God was calling us to do. We had a way for them to input that to us. About once a week, I did a little video of my 5 minutes outdoors somewhere on my back porch in my prayer room in front of the church, from the church roof, just something like that, just kind of looking at all the areas around. We prayed by zip code for the area for a while, and just to let prayer guide us. And it seems like such a radical idea anymore, and yet it really is fairly simple. And I will say that everywhere I've actually done the program, we were serious about it, we've seen significant change. And so I'm kind of a believer, but it's worth checking out. It's worth reading the stories. Some of the turnaround stories are really amazing. And they do involve structures that have been let go or deferred maintenance, or new use of structures that reintroduce the church to the mission field in new ways. And so it's just kind of a good place to keep the creative juices flowing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Kendall. I mean, I love those stories, because we know that it's not that we prayed hard enough that God finally woke up and decided to do something. It's like we prayed hard enough that we figured something else out. We allowed God to change our mind on something. So thank you for that word. And thanks to y'all for such a great conversation tonight. And I always, as I think about these things and whether we might continue, I want to give it to people just a little less often than they'd like, don't want to overdo this kind of thing. And at the same time, if it's helpful, want to keep getting folks together. And so would y'all be all right if Jill kind of puts together a roster and makes sure that you all know each other's contact information? Okay, that's great, because that's the other thing is that you don't have to go through us. You can contact each other directly with no problem. So
That'd be great. That would be, I would like that.
excellent.
Kendall, you're at Rio, Texas and San Antonio, correct? When
Yes,
you're not
yes.
in McAllen? Okay.
Yes, yeah. Well, we're getting ready for annual conference, so we're
Yeah,
down here
okay.
inspecting everything. But
Okay.
yeah, and I was going to say, what a great group. I was writing down how many years as you were introducing yourself. A lot of experience on the screen tonight, and so I hope you take advantage of each other's experience in that. And then we're working on some. I'll look at Laura for confirmation, but some rather complicated issues in Austin, and so I'm actually there probably more than anywhere else in the conference.
Mhm.
And I usually do try to set up some other meetings after the one that I have to be there in person for. So, if there's a place I can be helpful, or if you just want to go to dinner and talk about your church or something like that, let me know. And my administrative assistant, my Jill, is Nan, and we'll get it calendared.
Absolutely.
And if I can be helpful, to meet with your trustees or something, I'm glad to come, and y'all can ask me
Absolutely.
anything.
Absolutely. And as Kendall said to the finance people last night, I mean, property in Austin is no joke right now. And so it's either take care of it or flip it, or what are we going, it's a major strategic kind of decision. And I'll just say too that, we're here at the district level here for that as well, to help have those conversations or offer models or, convene those conversations. But in any case, we'll have
Very
more
high
to talk
level
about.
leadership.
Yeah, we'll have more to talk about. Another kind of pet thing of mine is what Jeffrey mentioned earlier, the whole question of clergy housing. And I do want to do kind of a survey of,
That'd be good.
I think I'm looking around. I don't think any of y'all does any of you still have a parsonage? I don't think so.
It's a
Yeah.
housing allowance.
I was on trustees to sell our parsonage.
Right, right.
That's been 20 something years ago now, I think.
Right. And some are in great shape with that, and others are spending the principal down and they're going to end up with nothing. And, so everybody's in a little different situation. That's for a different conversation. But
We're in high inflation time, and you're in a very high inflation market. So
Right.
that's a change going on right now.
Some issues. Yeah. Anyway,
Well,
there's
didn't
more.
ask me about insurance either, and I'm grateful, but I could spend the night talking about that too. So
We'll set up another call.
yeah.
But I do want to let y'all go. But thank you for your time. We will definitely circle back around with contact info, as well as kind of your own impressions as to whether this would be helpful to do again and what kinds of things you'd like to talk
First
about.
time she froze, I was so sure it was this hotel.
Sorry, it was me.
Go ahead, Mark.
It's my bad internet. I just said we'll follow up with contact info and kind of to get your impressions as to whether this would be helpful to do another time. So we'll follow up that way. So thank you. Kendall, will you pray us out of here tonight?
Oh, it'd be my pleasure. Let us pray. God, we're just grateful for the chance to be here. We're grateful for the chance to serve, and we're grateful for the people on the screen with us this evening and for the chance to share together. We're grateful for all the gifts and all the wisdom and all the experience that all of these folks represent. And God, we're grateful that you made us to work together. And so we pray that you'll guide us in the use of whatever you've given us, both personally and as a church. We can be good stewards of what we've been given. We can be creative stewards, and that you would guide us with wisdom in the decisions that we make, because they affect so many, both now and in the years to come. God, we offer you again the rest of this day, that you would use our gifts to bring good news to the world. For we ask in the name of Christ. Amen.
And thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for giving your time tonight.
Thank you.
And
So good
all the
hearing
ways you give your time.
seeing your faces.
Thank
God
you.
bless.
Thank you. Have a
Right.
good night.
Take care.